two of this. So what we have done is we have already had a look at IEEE 802.15.4, and now we are going to have a look at the standard called IEEE 1901.2a. Why is this important? This is important because this is a wired access technology. We saw one wireless, one wired. There are other access technologies also, including your Wi-Fi 802.11, and then there are things like Sigfox, and there are things like NB-IoT and uh, LPWAN, and so many other access technologies also. So it would have been nice if we went through all of them, but maybe I'll give that to you as assignment, and we could have a common presentation eventually if time permits. So for the time being, what I will do is I've already handled a wireless access technology. I'll handle one wired also, so that you get an understanding of what we are actually looking at. Because access technologies are not always limited to wireless connections, as we have, like as people usually believe, right? Whenever we talk about IoT, we assume that the connections are going to be wireless. That is not the case in all the scenarios. You can have wired connections also for setting up your IoT systems. So we'll have a look at that. And if you want to look at the IEEE standard for this, you can refer to this website that kind of gives you a complete understanding of what is IEEE 1901 standard. So I have just put it in the home page itself. Right. So this is what we are talking about. The IEEE 1901 is a protocol which is used for power line communication. So this is something which was very popular uh, in the past, mainly with the electricity boards. Okay, so like, do we have anybody who's kind of relatives or somebody is working with the electricity board? Just show of hands. No. Okay. Anyway, so what I wanted to say was there are several electricity boards which like use this uh, power line communication to transfer data. That is only related to their operational data, not for kind of transfer, providing internet services or anything like that. So remember that this is done over the power lines. We are not drawing a separate optical fiber wire through the power line kind of towers or something like that. It is done through the power carrying wires itself. And most of the times, just 1 second. Hello. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Okay, so yeah, so as I was saying, the power line, this is the typical power line communication, and this is something that some companies, some electricity utility providers use for carrying or transferring their operational data. So this type of networks are not particularly relevant for providing high speed communication. But as you can already understand, IoT is not supposed to provide high speed communication. It is supposed to transfer relevant data, maybe at a lower data rate, and it is supposed to kind of work in environments which do not allow you to transfer large amounts of data. So as such, what we have is we have this protocol which allows us to transfer lower amounts of data over the already existing power line network. So this is that is why this is called a wired communication. So if you look at it in a particular way, it is kind of very quickly uh, kind of being overtaken by the power utility companies investing heavily in the optical fiber communication also. So you will find that because hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is that because these electricity boards and the electricity utilities, they have the right of way over a huge tract of land. You know, you all, I hope you already know that you cannot put anything underneath a uh, electricity tower, right? You cannot make a road, you cannot build a house underneath the electricity, that big high voltage towers. So what happens is that they have the exclusive right of use for the whole line. I mean, like the electricity power line could be kind of extending over hundreds of thousands of kilometers. So all of them, they have exclusive right of way. So no matter what they send through it, they have the complete user rights, and nobody else is supposed to interfere also. As a result of that, what happens is they are in a very good position to also lay optical fiber cables there, because they do not have to get permission from anybody else, or minimum regulatory approval is required, because they already own the land, they already own the right of way, nothing else is going to cross it. So it makes a lot more sense for them to diversify into this area also. So a lot of such companies are providing back-end services with optical fiber cables to telecom service providers, and also providing retail transfer of data also. So that is one challenge which this type of a system is facing today. The OFC has become so cheap, but these things are used because it is not very easy for you, for any electric utility, to shift from one technology to another in a very quick way without any issues. So still you find these kind of systems being used in some power lines and some utilities. Okay. uh, I believe that you've heard of an Indian company called BPL. Yes, anyone heard of
Yes.
BPL?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, like once upon a time, it used to be a very big company in India. They used to make all the stereo systems and other things, but now it's kind of gone downhill. But they are one of the major manufacturers of power line equipment. So you need obviously specific type of equipment to kind of interface with the power lines and extract the data out of it. So BPL is a company which kind of specializes in making these kind of equipments, and most of the electricity boards are their clients. So they do that as a commercial venture even today. So yeah, so let's get back to the actual idea. So what are the applications of IoT of NB PLC? Please remember, PLC stands for Power Line Carrier Communication. It's not Programmable Logic Controller, as in uh, your industrial automation people use. Maybe you can refer to as PLCC, Power Line Carrier Communication. Carrier is the power line. So you will find that you can use narrowband power line carrier communication for utilities, like you have electric meters, right? So if you have a energy meter at your home, it is obviously going to be connected to the energy grid. And when it is connected to the energy grid, you already have a channel through which you can transfer the data. There is no need to provide it with a separate GPRS module or a 4G SIM or anything like that. You add this module to it, you can transfer data over the power line carrier itself. So that is one possible scenario where you can automate the energy metering. Right? So you will find that in Europe and other places, they have been using this for quite some time now. Right? Because the grids are much more reliable when compared to your 4G networks or other such things. In the campus, you even today lose network connectivity once in a while. That does not happen when you have wired connections, especially wired connections like electricity lines. Only under extreme weather conditions you will have breakage of lines, otherwise no. So it kind of makes a lot more sense for critical applications to be interfaced through this. And again, you will find that a lot of work happens at the distribution automation side. This is what I was talking about, that most of the electricity boards use this for transferring their grid related information and operational data to control devices on the grid. You also find situations where you have IoT devices which kind of control the public lighting. Right? In most of the places, what we have is we have somebody who's manually switching off the lights late in the night and early in the morning. Somebody just goes and kind of trips a switch, and you have the lights coming on for the entire street and then turning off for the entire street, and so many other things. But as technology has improved, you have sensors which can detect the current ambient light, and they may automatically turn on or off. You can also control the energy consumption. You can control or you can monitor how much energy is being utilized, how long it has been on, what is the time since the bulb was kind of put on the light, is the bulb damaged, is it glowing or not glowing. All those information can be collected directly without you having to worry about setting up a wireless communication interface and doing all the other stuff. Just add a power line communication module to it, and you have the device which is ready to go. Right? Does it make sense? Do you understand this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is some of the other things, and you have the EV charging stations which use this microgrids. Do you have an understanding of what is a microgrid? Hello? Have you heard of the term microgrid before? This is something which is kind of catching on very quickly. So if you have an understanding of what is a microgrid, it will be helpful in the future for you also. You know what's a grid? Did I lose you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So anyone who has got an idea of what is a microgrid, a show of hands, please.
Sir, is it like the energy consumption is localized in a particular?
Typically the generation and consumption both are localized. So that is, and mostly you will have a possibility where you can create energy islands separately. That means you can run them independent of the energy grid itself. We all kind of work in an environment where we have to be constantly connected to the grid. So if there is a catastrophic failure on the grid, maybe the entire city will go dark, or maybe the entire North India or the South India will go dark. You remember there used to be like there were a couple of instances of grid failure in the past decade. The whole North India kind of plunged into darkness in one shot. That is when you have catastrophic grid failure. But if you have microgrids where you have generation happening locally and consumption also happening locally with minimal connection to the overall grid, you have a possibility that you could be having a self-sufficient operation. So those kind of scenarios are called microgrids. So typically what happens is when you have like communities which are far flung or located very far away from conventional high tension lines, you will have very limited connectivity through maybe one low tension wire to the community, and from there that is just for making sure that you have it as a backup, but most of the generation and consumption will happen locally using either maybe solar or wind or a combination of solar and wind. So all the required power generation will happen there itself, and all the consumption also will usually happen there itself. And because it is on a very small scale, maybe something like say tens of houses or maybe maximum of 100 or 200 odd houses together, that will be the large size. Microgrids are typically much smaller in that, 5 houses, 10 houses, 20 houses, like that. So in that cases, you have something called as a microgrid. Right? So that is, and obviously if you have a microgrid, you have to have much more control over how much energy is being generated and how much is being consumed. So you need a faster, because there is no excess capacity for the excess generation or deficit generation to be absorbed. So there is very little tolerances available when you have a kind of a very small user base. So as a result of that, you need much better control. And for that, what we have to do is you have to look at better control and faster communication, not faster, maybe reliable communication. So for that kind of a scenario, you have to look at something like PLCC. Optical fibers also will do the same thing, but PLCC is a cheaper way of doing stuff and more robust. So you do not have to maintain a separate network to do this. If your power line network is working fine, your power line communication network will also work fine. So no additional communication overhead is needed. You don't need a communication expert to come and do all the optical fiber splicing and setting up and modem and all the other things. You have this module which has got a modem which will already be directly connected to the power line, give you the data, and that's it. So no excess work is needed. So in that case of microgrids, this will be useful. That is one possible use case of microgrids, also of power line communication. 1902 standard, 1901 standard, sorry. Right. So what are the major industry organizations? The major organization that we're talking about is the Home Plug Alliance. So what we are talking about is, you can obviously understand what is home plug. So the idea is that you should be able to plug into your power socket and you should be able to get data as a result. So instead of plugging in your laptop or something and having a separate plug point for getting data, you can do all of them in one shot. So if you want to have a look at what they are doing, please have a look at what is the Home Plug Netricity program. That will be a good understanding of what happens. And can I go to the more technical details of it now? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Again, if you remember, we talk about the two layers here also, physical layer and the MAC layer. For IEEE 802.15.4 also, we did the same thing, physical layer and MAC layer. So here also you look at two different layers. But the thing is that this is wired, right? So you will find that the frequency ranges defined are 3 to 500 kilohertz. So low frequency kind of communication. Okay, but much higher than the frequency of the electricity that is being transmitted. So that these two are completely separated and interference is as minimal as possible. And you will find that there are three major players in this who regulate the bands which are possible. So you can see that CENELEC, FCC and ARIB are the three major standardization authorities which work on setting up frequencies for PLC communication, power line carrier communication. Okay. Why? Because these people have been using power line carrier communication for quite some time now. Since about an 80s, like they have started working on power line carrier communication, and it's kind of very well standardized. Even today, you will find a lot of work being happening there. So both Europe, USA and Japan. And you can see all of them have different frequency standards, which we are talking about here. So all the readings that you're seeing here are in kilohertz. Okay. So it starts from 3 kilohertz, 490 kilohertz to about 500 kilohertz, roughly. right? So you will find that there are different bands which are used, and that is also one of the reasons why you may find that in some cases, for some bands, these equipments will not work across countries. Okay, so that is one thing that we should be worried about when you are kind of dealing with this. So, but there are some standardization which has actually happened. So that is where you will find that 37.5 is common for FCC and ARIB. So whatever you are using in Japan may work in the US also. Same thing happens with this also, 154.687 and 154.687. So you have broadly the starting ranges being same. So equipment should work without major problems as such. And Senelec has got 4 separate bands that you will find of different ranges, and as usual they don't see eye to eye with Americans, so they have this problem again. So mostly whatever works in Europe may not work in America. So that is what we do. Okay, so these are the frequency bands that you will find, and the modulation scheme that we typically use is based on OFDM. Have you done any study on OFDM so far? Communication systems, you must have studied OFDMs.
Sir, I
Hello?
think we didn't study it yet.
Orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, OFDMs? Not yet, or is it part? It must be part of some of the courses, no? Any one of the courses?
Sir, we only saw the basics, sir.
Okay, but you understand what OFDM is, no? That should be good enough.
Sir, FDM and OFDM, are they the same?
No. OFDM is orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. FDM is frequency division multiplexing, right? OFDM is a totally different concept.
Yes, sir.
It's actually FDM only, but the components are orthogonal, so interference is very low. It's a different concept as such. Okay, I think maybe you may be learning this because it's an important, it's a very popular scheme. OFDM is very popular because of its several advantages that you find. So maybe you will be learning it in communications. Do you have communications course? Wireless communication, do you learn separately? I did not check your syllabus before. Hello?
Yes, sir. I think we didn't study it yet, sir.
Okay, maybe you will go through this. So yeah, so the idea is that it's it's a multiplexing technique, and it's a very popular multiplexing technique and it provides lesser interference as such, and you will find OFDM being used for a large number of access technologies now. So we'll go into that in detail maybe if you people don't have any subject which handles that. So later on we'll see, but right now I have to quickly pass through this. So what we are looking at is you have different kinds of modulation also along with this. So you can see the binary phase shift keying, quadrature phase shift keying, and phase shift keying. So you have 8-point phase shift keying. So these are all different types of digital modulation schemes. Have you studied of any of the digital modulation schemes so far? Or is that also a part
Yes, sir.
of
We have it course.
all of this you have done? Or which ones have you studied so far?
Sir, phase shift keying, amplitude shift keying.
And digital modulations?
Yes, sir. PAM and PPM. Quadrature and phase modulation.
Those are very old ones. Anyway, fine. But understand that these are variants of that. So you have 4 or 5 different types of modulation schemes that can be used for this. And one major feature that I have to explain here is that the throughput rate can dynamically change. So based on what type of modulation scheme and what type of tones you are planning to use, you will find that the data rate and the throughput can change. This is not possible in all the other previous cases that we have seen. IEEE 802.15.4, it cannot change the throughput rate. You have a fixed throughput rate which can be generated depending on what type of headers you use and so on. But here you can have dynamically varying throughputs. So at some point of time you will have a different communication rate. Some other point of time you will have a totally different communication or throughput rate. So that is possible with this kind of tools. Right. So you can see here we can vary the frequency from 4.5 kbps to 46 kbps. So like 10 times improvement in the frequency is the throughput is possible. Here also if you see 21 to 234, again around 10 times change is possible based on the type of modulation you use. And obviously if you change different types of modulation, the noise also will increase, the corruption of the signal will also correspondingly increase. As a result of that, you may have packet losses which will significantly increase also. So it's a kind of a trade-off. That is also an answer to the question of why don't we typically just use highest data rate all the time. That's because you have a trade-off. Higher data rates, more packet losses will happen because of the interference that happens. Because remember, you are transferring data through power lines. So it's a problem. Okay. So these are some of the major features of the physical layer. We already saw that the payload size can change dynamically, which basically means throughput, right? If the throughput can change, you also have a possibility of changing of the payload. So to ensure that you can have a payload size change possible, you can segment the MAC sublayer. How that happens, we will see in the next slide. But the main feature of this particular protocol 1901 is that if you have the MAC size payload, which is very large when compared to the PSDU, you can partition them into smaller segments and send them separately. So you can see smaller amounts of data can be cut into smaller segments and then transmitted separately. Unfortunately, the problem is every time you chop the data into smaller pieces, you may have to add padding bytes, because sometimes what will happen is that the MAC payload kind of minimum requirement may not be met. So typically this happens when you have data packets which are kind of at the end of the communication that is happening. So in some cases you may have to add this, and you can send data only as bytes to make sure that things are doing better. So sometimes there may be extra space for a byte or something, and there padding actually happens. So some amount of useless information also gets transmitted, which are typically stripped out at the receiver side. Okay, and you can also do both unicast and broadcast type of messages, which can be both segmented as per the dynamic change in the conditions. So if you look at the MAC data, the protocol stack, this is what you will find as the frame. So what you have is you have a header unit, and you have the payload, and then you have a footer. So obviously footer will be mainly for error checking and other things. Initial ones are all the ones which are required for ensuring that what kind of protocol you are following, what kind of modifications you're looking at, what is the destination address, what is the source address. So all those things are typically, all the operational requirements are taken care of by the header unit. Eventually when the receiver receives this information, all these things are stripped off, and the payload information from the payload is only extracted. All the other things are typically discarded. And what you're seeing here as 3, 2, and 1, these are all in terms of bytes. 3 bytes for this, 2 bytes for this, 1 byte for this, 0 or 2 bytes for this, 0, 2 or 8 bytes, 0 or 2 bytes, 0, 2 or 8, depending on different modes of communication that you have. These are all the different number of bytes that you will end up using. So your MAC size will change dynamically based on different modes of communication that you are picking up, or different what is it? There are variants that you can pick up, so different modes will require different type of. Okay, so that is the MAC layer, and we quickly go to the topology. I have how much time? Okay, I have like 5 minutes more to go, so I'll quickly go through the topology that you see here. So you can see here that the topology requirements are kind of typically restricted to mesh topology, because obviously this is a power line communication, and in power line communication you cannot have peer-to-peer or point-to-point communication. You also cannot have star. So the reasonably possible scenario that you have for all practical purposes is that the network would already be available and it will already be a mesh type, right? So that is how most of these systems are available. And also you must understand that this is a very this kind of a communication is kind of subjected to a lot of noise because of the power line. So a lot of, because you're transmitting energy along with the communication, so obviously there will be a lot of losses as a result of this. So you have a lot of signal degradation, interference, so many issues will usually come. And your receiving equipment is also, it's not possible to remove all kinds of problems with it. So you will find that mesh tech kind of a connection is typically the ideally suited means of doing this, because you can have boosters in between which can collect signals from others, boost it and send it over again. So in those kind of situations, you will find that traditionally the deployments by default will be of mesh type, because all the devices are anyway interconnected to each other. So that's how it works, right? So that is the major advantages in the second last topic. Okay, so you can see here the advantage of devices relaying the traffic of other devices, so longer distances can be segmented. So you can relay the information from say one home to a separate mesh node which is situated near to the transformer, move it further so that you do not have to transmit some data over very long distances. You will have data aggregators in between which will collect it and transmit it over and over again to reach longer distances. Okay, and also you will find that IEEE 901901 has the advantage that it will allow you to do higher protocols also, which basically means you can implement things like IPv6, 6 low power wireless PAN, and you have IPv6 RPL protocols. All these kind of protocols which are at higher level can also be implemented as a result of on top of the IEEE 1901 standard. I have not seen many of this being implemented. IPv6 implementation, some of them I have seen, but other implementations I'm yet to see. So IPv6 is something which is kind of standard now, so we find that in some places, but other technologies I'm yet to see. But it is possible. You can have other technologies also being implemented on top of it. So last topic, we'll go to the security. So you will find that the authentication is typically done with the help of AES. So this is the same technology that we use for securing IEEE 802.15.4 also. Okay, so AES actually stands for Advanced Encryption Standard, and it's kind of a very established and kind of relatively old system that we have around 2000, 2001. Around about that, the whole thing just became standard at that time. There are more complicated algorithms, but this is simple to implement. Okay, so it's a cryptographic algorithm that typically people use to secure things. And I don't know if you understand what is symmetric key algorithm, but this kind of is a symmetric key algorithm type of a system for encryption. But that is not relevant for your requirement right now. All you need to know is that we use the advanced encryption standard for authentication applications. So you have several other encryption standards which are available. This is slightly older version of encryption, but still quite effective mainly considering the application that we are talking about. We do not need extremely high levels of security for such kind of application, so AES will usually work. Okay. Another thing is that you have you can also do key management, which is similar to that of advanced encryption standards. Please remember that there is something called you have encryption and decryption as two process of cryptography or security. Once you send the data, it is usually encrypted, and at the receiving side you have the key using which you will decrypt the data. So typically how the encryption and decryption keys are maintained is with the help of key management protocol, and typically the same protocol that IEEE 802.15.9 uses, same thing is used by 1901 also. If you are interested, I will share some more extra material on key management protocol which IEEE 1901 uses, but for the time being I think this should be sufficient for you. Okay, so that's all there is regarding IEEE 1901.2a, and we will continue with a new topic in the next class. I suggest that you have a look at these topics. And one more thing, I have updated the previous slide on the IEEE 802.15.4 in the AUMS. I have added one or two more slides on security also that we did not do before the exam started. So I have added a couple of more slides. I will not be taking that in the class. You can refer to that and understand. If there are queries, you are welcome to drop it. Like you can mail it to me, or you can SMS me, or you can WhatsApp me the doubts that you have. I will be willing to help you out in whichever way I can. If you need an additional class which kind of describes all those things, that can also be done. So please let me know if it is okay. Okay, and this PPT will be uploaded today or tomorrow, so that you can have a look at this. Okay, so are there any queries, or would you kind of like to have a look at the presentation first and then ask questions later in the discussion session? Okay, so I'm not hearing anything so far. So I'll upload the material. Please have a look at that, and maybe in the discussion hour we can go through any queries that you may have regarding this presentation. Okay, and I will be very quickly giving you an assignment also on different access technologies. I'll give you roll number wise split up, and I'll hand it over to you quickly. Okay, I mean, like that will happen within this weekend. I'll give you the deadline also, so no worries. Okay, so thank you all for attending. If there are no further queries, I think we can